So this is a bit of a minor issue thing to talk about, but something I kind of wanted to bring about because I found it fascinatingly interesting. I've always had a real kind of bee in my bonnet or some sort of kind of ill will to people who are hypocritical. And I know we're all kind of hypocrites in our own way. We really are. We all kind of say one thing and sometimes do the other. But I feel like sometimes, especially when you kind of get on your soapbox in terms of social justice, in terms of social issues in general, politics and whatnot, there is a level of hypocrisy that's not needed or that's not welcomed, and that also, I think, can put your whole message into disrepute. A similar to a thing can kind of be a good example I can kind of pull out from the universe could be maybe LeBron James, right? Some people would say LeBron James, he's a big advocate for social justice issues concerning marginalized communities, but then as soon as it kind of impacts his pocket, he keeps quiet. Case in point being he didn't really have nothing to say about the Chinese government's treatments of the how do you pronounce them? There's a Urigis or Urigis, however people going about that sort of stuff, right? Or maybe some of the lack of representation or the minimization representation of certain movies, and that was kind of promoted in China where certain people's faces were getting shrunk down because they didn't like the color of the skin. He kept quiet about that sort of stuff because, of course, you know, working with Nike and whatever Chinese brands that he has working out there, that was going to impact his pocket, so he kept silent that one. That one's a bit difficult to say. It's a bit of a stretch because I still do think just because you're advocating for the rights of African Americans in your country doesn't necessarily mean you have to fight for every single black person on the face of the earth or every single person that isn't white on the face of the earth. It's a bit crazy, but I do get the hypocrisy. I do understand it in that respect because he has interest in that country. Why are you not speaking up about it? You're there all the time. You have business interest there. You should be representing everybody because they're all your fans too, but he doesn't. Cool. But then the other thing that is really frustrating too, you see a lot, is this whole weird kind of women empowerment thing that happens, especially within the kind of hip hop sort of urban space with black women. And most of it, I get where it's coming from. It's coming from a real place because legitimately there has been some real heinous and horrible things that have happened in that industry, mostly concerning guys basically taking advantage of young, impressionable women in the industry and doing all sorts of nonsense to them. And because they're in a position where they can't exactly fight back, or the powers that be or the gatekeepers don't really allow them a platform or a process or a roadmap in order to kind of raise any grievances up, they kind of have to kind of swallow it all and keep quiet. But of course, you know, social media, everyone's got a platform and everyone's got an opportunity to basically say their piece without any kind of fear of repercussions, right? Or they got the support of their flipping strangers or people that have followed them, so it's a bit more easy to kind of get your message out there, speak your piece, speak truth into power, all those kind of buzzwords that people throw out there. So when people talk about female empowerment, I feel like sometimes it does come from a real place, but it also comes from an opportunistic place, because as soon as you say stuff like that, people automatically want to get behind you, rally behind you, agree with what you say, lift you up. Automatically sometimes your voice kind of has maybe more weight to it because you are representing something bigger than yourself, sort of thing, right? It's all that sort of connotations attached to it. But at the heart of it, I've always thought it's quite self-serving. It really is quite self-serving, because usually the people that say this stuff the most, especially the ones that don't prove it with action and deeds and just kind of speak about it all the time, they're usually the people who are just situational or circumstantial women's rights advocates. When it only suits their needs or when it only advances their career, they'll speak about it. If it doesn't, it puts them in an uncomfortable position, suddenly they're quiet about it. A case in point would probably be Lena Dunham. She made all sorts of excuses for one of her guy friends that was accused of some sort of assault thing. She kind of basically said the girl that was accusing him lied or something. I forgot the actual details of the case, but that was quite an egregious one. And another really egregious one that I thought was really poignant and something I wanted to speak about was the issue that happened with the Joe Budden podcast, or a kind of podcast that was on his network previously, called See the Thing Is, that was hosted by Mandii, Bridget, and a lady called Olivia. Sometime, I guess, was it last year, whenever Olivia, the third Mike girl, decided to leave See the Thing Is podcast. At the time, we didn't really know what the issue was, but then she came out and read a statement and essentially alleged or accused that Joe Budden was being completely inappropriate in terms of being a CEO or a boss of that network, in terms of how he was acting with her. And in a specific situation, when he came to be a guest on their podcast, he was throwing out really lewd remarks. I think a few of the stuff that he said, even more the stuff he got said, got cut and got edited out, but the stuff that we saw as fans already was already bad. And then I think he then went up the final straws when they went to hug, or he went to kind of hug it out with her in terms of kind of piecing up in his way, and he kind of weirdly gyrated or did some sort of motion to Olivia where she felt really violated, she didn't feel comfortable, and blah blah blah, right? But on paper, looking at it, a basically, I would say, black and white situation where you could say, hey, you are in the wrong from what I saw, it was obviously inappropriate, you especially being her boss. She also interpreted it the wrong way. She didn't receive it well. She didn't like it whatsoever, and she didn't like what you did. So there's no like good guy or bad guy. It's just like one thing was right or the other thing was wrong. You call out the wrong person, you just keep it moving. But for whatever reason, the other two hosts of the show, see, the thing is, Brandy and Bridget, just used it as a position or used it as opportunity to basically remind everybody they're full of shit, because they essentially excused Joe for his behavior. Didn't really chastise him in public, I didn't feel like, enough to the point where you would think, because again, I get it, he's their friend, so you're not going to throw your friend completely under the bus, but still, they essentially made excuses for Joe's actions. And essentially what you got to see from it was that obviously there were some issues that they had as females on that show, where maybe they weren't the closest friends or whatever. Cool. So because they didn't like this Olivia Dope girl, it was easier for them to kind of dismiss her allegations against Joe because they didn't like her, and also because they wanted to continue doing the show on Joe's network and continue in order to kind of reach their goals in terms of media and what they wanted to do, which again I thought was disgusting and pretty trashy. And this is a good example of it to kind of rehash it and kind of go back on it. I'm going to play the Olivia Dope original allegations. I'm going to play Bridget and Mandii going on the No Jumbo podcast and basically explaining why they're hypocrites and trying to make it make sense, which it doesn't. And then I'm also going to go back to a video where they're speaking about the Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion situation, and Bridget is talking with a lot of spice, a lot of vim, and essentially she's of the position where we should kind of believe Megan just because she's a black woman and she suffered something, and she said she suffered something, we should believe her, which obviously whatever you want to agree on that point or not. But how she has that kind of vigor, that kind of vim for someone she doesn't know, but then when or something she doesn't know in a situation she didn't witness, but in a situation that she did witness and someone she did know in that short period of time, she was able to make all sorts of excuses for the excuses just because it seemed to marry up with her career more so. So I'm going to play all those three videos back to back, and I'm going to obviously do some closing statements on the other side. But this is Olivia Dope basically detailing some of her allegations against Joe and why she decided to leave the podcast and network.
At 14:34, 14 minutes 34 seconds, there's an edit in the recording because Joe says him and I should speak more because, quote, he's been wanting to fuck me since we've met.
Yo.
Everyone in the studio, including production staff, laughed uncomfortably while one of my co-hosts confirmed that to be true. I am mortified by this revelation, not only because it's revealed while we are amongst the presence of all of the production staff, but it's also being done while we are also recording audio as well as visual. That scene was cut out, and it jumps to Joe repeating we should speak more because we have the least dialogue. At 19 minutes and 26 seconds, another edit happens because Joe makes another suggestion to having sex with me. This is shown. I'm sorry. Joseph makes another suggestion to have sex with me. That scene is edited out, and what is shown in right after that is me closing my eyes, saying no, and then he says never mind. At 21 minutes 30 seconds, Joe tells me to hit a button, bitch, because I didn't hit a sound effect fast enough. At 24 minutes and 54 seconds, Joe makes a comment that I am throwing my singleness in his face, and he thought we were going to be a network power couple. Once again, I'm trying to laugh.
Cool. Right, and then we're going to go to the Bridget Kelly and Mandii trying to explain why they will basically side with Joe in this kind of, sexual assault incident that she's basically alleging. Come on, you gonna play or not? You gonna play or not? Oh, you go. Oh, for goodness sake, man. Bear with me a second. My computer is running super slow. As you can see, I do not have the best possible equipment on deck right now, but I'm making it work with what I have available. So please bear with me whilst I go back to the previous page. Yep, there you go. Okay, this is Bridget, Kelly, and Mandii speaking to Adam 22 from No Jumper about why they decided to side with Joe Budden when Olivia Dope accused him of sexual harassment at the workplace. How will they make this make sense?
That was by far like the bottom.
Did you feel like you had to choose between your friend and your identity group? Because of course, like, you as a black woman, you're expected to stand up for other black women. Like that had to be a part of like the whole decision, right? Like, you're standing by this man instead of this other black woman, right? I feel like that would be a lot of the heat you were taking.
But here's the thing in which, and she probably gonna cut me off on this because she probably don't want me to say this, but we could be women, but we ain't friends with everybody. We don't like everybody. Like, and so when we talk about, oh my God, all these rapper women should be friends and come together.
So imagine what they're saying there. I don't interrupt, but imagine what they're saying there. Essentially what they're saying is that just because they weren't friends or just because they didn't like Olivia Dope, that's why they're able to basically side with their friend in that regard. Which again, terrible thing to say. But then you can't say that when on the other side, when it came to the Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion situation, they only sided with Megan because she was another black woman who they identified in terms of identity. They don't know the woman, they don't know Tory. So why would you side with her, vis-a-vis him when you weren't there? They obviously both have two conflicting views on what the situation was and what occurred. It's going to go to the courts. We're going to find out the truth, or a version of the truth, hopefully. So that's where the hypocrisy comes in, right? You want to choose your friends in one position, or you want to say you don't want to believe a woman because you're not friends with her, but on the other side you want to just jump out the window and side with somebody just because they happen to be a female that looks like you. That doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean? And also it's quite disgusting too, because it means what? You won't believe a victim of sexual harassment depending on if you're friends or not with them. So if your enemy, someone you don't like, was a victim of sexual assault, what would that mean? Would that mean you would sit there and laugh? Would that mean that you'd be happy that it happened to them? How does that make any complete sense? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If anything, they should just been honest and said, hey, we were still trying to secure the bag. I just moved out here. I just left this job, or I did whatever. I wasn't about to just let everything, run off because of a little, I thought something I didn't think. Would have been honest with a better explanation. If they would have just said, we didn't think it was that big of a situation. Joe said that stuff to us all the time. That's his kind of humor. He did overstep the mark, I felt like, but at the time I didn't think it was that big of a deal. That would have been a better excuse to say than to come out there and say, oh, because we didn't like him, because we're not all friends, why should we all stick up for each other? Isn't that the whole point of the female empowerment thing anyway? Isn't that the whole point of believe all black women? It doesn't mean believe all black women happen to be your friends. It's believe all black women because you're saying we need to have this collective responsibility or looking out for each other, that we can all band around each other and say, even if we have our differences, let's agree that the bigger enemy, the bigger threat are these abuser guys, not us. Even if we aren't friends, let's put our kind of differences to one side and just try and go at the person or at the group of people who are attacking us the most, who are killing us, who are raping us, all this sort of stuff. That's what you're meant to be arguing against. But again, hypocrisy at its finest.
We don't ask that of men. And at the end of the day, we're all still humans, and I rock for who I want to rock with. And there was a relationship where I had with Joe for beyond 10 years. I met Liv a week before starting the pod. And so unfortunately, where it came to, am I standing with the overall aspects of women, or am I standing with someone? Unfortunately, because again, in retrospect, maybe wasn't the best decision. However, I chose to just stand with a friend.
I think it was the best decision. But I think we made the right decision.
Terrible garbage people.
I will say that I think the part that's tough about being in the space and in the culture that we exist in is that as much as we would love to preach solidarity, as much as our audience and our demo would love to...
Shut up. Anyway, the reason why I say shut up, because look, hear this clip. This is what's going to make you see that hypocrisy is astounding. So this is a clip taken from October 2020, when they were all obviously together as a group, and they're speaking about the Tory Lanez situation and Megan Thee Stallion. I think this is just coming off when he just released his album, and obviously, Bridget is obviously not happy at the fact that he didn't read the room, and she feels like it's inappropriate considering what he's going through, blah, 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 blah. And, they have some very conflicting opinions about this situation, which they weren't even there present for. They kind of sided and decided one person's guilty, one person isn't guilty, one person's a villain, one person's a victim. But then when it comes to something they were in the room for, they were sitting there exactly in that same room and saw and heard how uncomfortable their friend was with the interaction that was going on with their boss. And supposedly she felt like she got sexually harassed and she got sexually assaulted, whatever it may be, however you view it, if you think she was exaggerating or not, somebody that's sitting next to you is meant to be your colleague, meant to be your sister, meant to be your rider, not sister, but you know what I mean, meant to be somebody you're meant to be protecting in that regard, your colleague. They felt as if like, nah, we're not going to believe you, but we're going to believe this other lady we don't even know. But hear what they have to say about that whole Tory Megan situation.
And see what happens from there.
I think that's a great idea.
It's crazy because a lot of people have definitely been talking about, of course, the Meg Thee Stallion, the Tory Lanez incident. Tory Lanez is just out here living his best life, done dropped an album, and now is shooting videos in New York City.
No, he's just out here shooting everything. Well, no one cares. Nobody asked.
Boom.
Nobody asked. Nobody cared. Yeah, it's just no one cares.
I hate too because I guess it plays back to your 5 minutes of cancel. I mean, people was really like trying to sign things to send him back to Canada, and here he is just literally walking the streets.
Well, no, I've actually seen a lot. Once he dropped that project, that 5 minutes of cancellation was over as soon as he dropped the project. It was like, oh, well, he's telling his side of the story. What? He dropped that project. First of all, let's just discuss the lack of PR and marketing that exists all across the industry.
Where is the A&R to stop these?
People have stopped reading the room. I don't know what the fuck happened. People have stopped reading the room.
There is no room.
No one reads the room. Nobody follows any sort of standard or protocol as far as what should happen socially when you drop. No, he dropped a whole entire project the day after we received the information about Breonna Taylor's case and how there were no charges for her murder.
R.I.P. Breonna Taylor.
Right? So, and fuck those guys that shot her. I'm not even gonna call them cops. I'm not even. There's no positive words, potential positive
Freedom
words
fighter,
that I am willing to grant them. Fuck those guys that killed her, and anybody that shot. That shot those wanton endangered bullets fuck them.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
So for him to drop a project,
say it,
the day after, considering what black women are already being asked to endure and converse appalling and accept.
The lack of awareness.
The lack of compassion.
The same could be said for you.
Is appalling. That to me is appalling.
The same could be said for them, no? The lack of compassion and understanding. The same could be said for them. For a colleague that sat right next to them on the same couch, they launched a podcast. So even if they weren't friends, they launched a show with them together. They had something invested in that they were both trying to strive for, to be great at, in order to kind of make a better future for themselves. And one person suffers at the hand of somebody else, somebody you meant to call a boss, a friend. You should be disappointed, right? You should be pulling that person to one side. But you shouldn't be publicly coming out and saying, oh, we're not friends and we don't have to fight for everybody. And what?
Is appalling. And
I really think, I mean, you see a lot of men, R.I.P. Breonna Taylor, everyone has been posting that. And it's because she died. So what, Meg would have had to die for y'all to see the severity of the fact that this man shot?
And again, I'm not going to play the whole thing because my computer obviously is glitching all the time, but the hypocrisy is astounding. Honestly, mind-boggling, astounding. And it just goes to show that a lot of people who basically form their entire identities around representing a particular group of people, usually, from my experience, are full of shit. Especially the ones that stand on a soapbox and speak about it all the time. The ones that are actually doing the work on the ground level, the ones that are working in local community centers, uplifting the voices of marginalized people, people that have maybe no prospects, people who basically are downtrodden, people who basically have been forgotten about. They are doing the work day to day. They don't get on social media telling you and reminding you to just hashtag doing whatever. They just show it by works and deeds. They don't go around boasting about it and talking about it, because the ones that do, once they get put in a position where they have to actually stand for something, they usually don't stand for anything. That was their test. Everyone gets that test, I think. If you are an actual social justice activist, you are out there trying to, again, represent marginalized people, people that are unrepresented, you usually, I feel like, get a test. You usually get tested 1 time, 2 or 3 times. It happens sometimes even when you become super religious, right? When you rededicate your life to Christ, or you go back into, you kind of rededicate your life back into Islam or flipping Judaism, whatever it may be, I would say that most likely or not, there comes a time, especially in your adult age, where your faith gets tested, right? Where your dedication gets tested, your resolution gets tested, your new way of life or your new outlook on life gets tested, and it's up to you to really pass that test or to not pass that test. And clearly they didn't. And again, I have no problem with it. You can do what you want. They're all great women, but let's not kind of make excuses for ourselves. Let's just say we decided to change the rules on ourselves, to change our criteria on how we support each other, because at that time it served our interests and our career prospects better to align ourselves with Joe Budden than it did to align ourselves with Olivia Dope. As crass and as disgusting that is the truth. But don't then turn around and say, no, we want, because that's what they think. They want both sides. They want to be able to, do their thing on their own, independent lady. We don't just go along with the sheep. We're not just here, trying to represent every single woman out there because we're doing our own thing. But on the other side, they also want the sympathy to be kind of collectively grouped in with all women, and to get all the benefits that they all get in when it comes to being unrepresented and it comes to not having a voice or not just being seen in certain places. It's like, no. Choose a lane. If you're going to be with all the toxic masculinity shit, you stand there. If you're going to be with all this, women empowerment stuff, you stand over there. But the hypocrisy is just frightening, absolutely frightening. But again, it's kind of better this way, because at least you see people's true colors. And then at least also you then can decide whether you're a business, whether you're a creative, a co-host, whatever you are. You can then decide, do I want to rock with you or not? Because they've shown you what they're about, right? They've shown you what they're about. They've shown you if the bag is big enough, they will put their morals and their ethics and their ideals to one side in order to secure their bag. If that's the case and you're okay with it, then you rock with them. But if you're not, you bounce. But then you can't complain if they then snake you. That's the thing I don't like. If you're gonna ride with a scumbag and end up snaking you, I don't want to hear you complain. But if you don't mind riding with a scumbag and hoping that doesn't go wrong for you, you can get as much good as you can at it. Because let's be honest, as much as I dislike those Bridget and Mandii girl, they did play the game pretty well. They were able to secure a pretty decent deal with Joe Budden. They were able to get all the eyes and ears of his network or his YouTube channel on their show. And I think since the show's been taken off of since they've decided to leave the Joe Budden podcast network, the views have been drastically different than what they were getting on Joe Budden podcast. So even though the views on that network weren't that great, they were still better than what they're doing on their own. So clearly Joe did something for them. He also let them keep the IP. He let them walk away, so with all the intellectual property and shit. They were able to take it away and go into another platform. So it's all well and good, right? And he honored the deal as well. He didn't snake them in the end. He probably did more right by them than he did with Rory and Mal, which is, again, goes to show how much of a dickhead Joe Budden is in that regard, right? But still, they got what they needed out of it, no problem. But let's not deny it, man. These women are flipping hypocrites, bruv. This in the worst way possible.